My name is Oliver Rowe. I am 66 years old and the owner of Rowe Logistics, a company I built from the ground up over 4 decades. From a single rusty delivery truck and a tiny warehouse in Dayton, I turned my vision into a bustling operation with a fleet of 78 trucks, 4 regional depots, and contracts spanning the entire Midwest. Back in the day, I was a hands-on man. I could load a pallet, fix a transmission, or broker a deal with the same ease I lit a cigarette back then, before the doctor and my daughter made me quit. Speaking of Melissa, she was always sharp. My only child, born with her mother's grace and my bull-headed determination. She'd follow me around the depot as a little girl asking questions about invoices, clambering into cabs and watching forklifts like they were amusement park rides. I taught her to drive a forklift myself on her 14th birthday, sneaking her in early on a Saturday. She got the hang of it quicker than most new hires. I remember thinking, she's got it in her blood. Maybe one day she'll run this place. Over the years, Melissa took a different path: college, business school, and a stint at a tech logistics startup out west. She married Michael, a polite but forgettable financial consultant. They settled in Chicago. We stayed in touch, the occasional weekend visit, a call here and there. I assumed she'd found her own way. That was fine. I wasn't planning to retire anytime soon. That Tuesday started like any other. I was at the office by 7 a.m., sipping bitter coffee and reviewing last month's performance metrics. Around 9:30, Marlene buzzed me. "Your daughter's here," she said. "Melissa?" I frowned. She didn't call. "She's not alone," Marlene added, lowering her voice. "Michael's with her, and they brought something." "Send them in," I said. Melissa entered first, radiant and confident, her dark hair tied back like her mother used to wear it. Michael followed, briefcase in hand, looking more accountant than ever. "Dad," she said, kissing my cheek. "Hope we're not intruding?" "Depends," I replied. "To what do I owe the honor?" Melissa sat opposite me, Michael beside her. He placed the briefcase on the desk, clicked it open, and slid out a manila folder. "We've been thinking a lot about your future," Melissa began, her tone measured. "And the future of Rowe Logistics." A warning bell rang in my head. "Is that so?" "The industry's changing, Dad," she continued. "Automation, data analytics, green fleet compliance. We think, Michael and I, that it's time for a more modern approach." "Modern approach?" Michael leaned forward. "With all due respect, sir, the company has great bones, but the future needs vision, younger leadership." Melissa pulled out a document and slid it across to me. I recognized the structure, legal transfer forms. "We've prepared everything. You'd still retain a ceremonial role, of course. Founder Emeritus. A generous retirement package. We thought Father's Day would be a good time to announce the transition. Make it celebratory." I stared at the paper. My name. My company. My daughter's signature already in place. "You want me to retire?" I said. Melissa reached for my hand. "We want you to rest. Enjoy life. You've earned it." For a moment, I felt the air go out of the room. I looked at her, the little girl I once hoisted onto forklift pedals, and saw someone else. Someone calculating, strategic, prepared. I didn't sign. "I need time to think," I said, pushing the folder back. "I'll get back to you." Michael opened his mouth, then closed it. Melissa looked disappointed, but nodded. "Of course, Dad. We'll talk on Sunday? You're still coming for dinner?" "Wouldn't miss it," I said, standing. "But don't count on any signatures." They left soon after. I stood by the window, watching them walk to their car. Michael was talking animatedly. Melissa listened, her face unreadable. I sat down at my desk, hands on the folder, staring at the empty signature line. My thoughts were storm clouds. Betrayal stung, but not as much as the realization that they thought I'd just roll over. They thought wrong. I left early that day and drove out to the industrial park we were planning to expand into. I parked and walked the gravel lot, trying to picture it all. Not the trucks or the buildings, but my future. What would I do without the business, without the routine? As I stood in the lot, a memory surfaced. Melissa at 12, her hand in mine, looking up at the new warehouse and whispering, "One day, this will be mine." I believed her then. Now, I wasn't so sure. When I got home that evening, the house felt colder than usual. I poured myself a glass of whiskey and sat on the porch. It wasn't the offer that bothered me. It was the ambush, the assumption that I would be grateful to be put out to pasture. I knew I couldn't confront them yet. I needed a plan. So I did what I always did when I needed clarity. I went back to the numbers. I spent the next few nights poring over company reports, ownership structures, contingencies. I called my attorney under the guise of updating some estate plans. He didn't need to know everything just yet. By Friday, I had made up my mind. I would go to that Father's Day dinner. I would smile and eat and listen. And then, when they thought they had me cornered, I'd show them just how well I had prepared. They made their move. Now it was my turn. While I reviewed strategy and ownership documents late into the nights, Melissa and Michael were playing a different game. At their home, sleek and sterile in Chicago's northern suburbs, plans were unfolding behind my back. "Dad won't make a fuss," Michael was saying one evening, pacing the kitchen. "We just need to keep pushing, get the board concerned, apply pressure from the outside." Melissa sipped a glass of Pinot Noir. "We need to be careful. If he smells coercion, he'll dig in his heels." Michael smirked. "Then we don't make it look like us. Let the client start doubting. Let the board ask questions. If his reputation starts slipping, he'll have no choice." Melissa didn't reply, but she didn't object either. Instead, she opened her laptop and pulled up a spreadsheet labeled Transition Strategy, Row Logistics. It listed potential allies within the company, anticipated legal roadblocks, and a column titled Pressure Points. Back in Dayton, I arrived at the office on Monday to find 3 emails flagged urgent. 2 were from long-term clients expressing concern about leadership continuity at Row Logistics. The third, from one of our freight partners, asked whether I had officially retired. One even mentioned hearing about a generational transition, a term I had never used. I stared at the screen, heart thumping. Someone was feeding them stories. Later that afternoon, Marlene knocked on the office door holding a registered letter. "Came for you, Oliver. Legal envelope." I slid it open. Inside was a notice of potential legal action. It was from a consultancy Melissa had partnered with during her stint in California. The letter cited contractual obligations and threatened breach of agreement claims based on strategic commitments Row Logistics had allegedly made. I had never signed any such commitments, but Melissa had access to plenty of internal documents. It hit me then. This wasn't just an over-eager child trying to modernize a company. This was a coup, a full-on power grab masked as concern. For the first time in 40 years, I felt something I hadn't felt in business: ambushed. And yet, I wasn't afraid. The shock wore off, and in its place came something far older and deeper, a kind of steel I hadn't needed in a long time. They wanted a war? They were about to get one. But I wouldn't play their game. I called a few of our oldest clients personally that evening. I assured them I hadn't retired. I booked meetings, in person. I dug into our contracts, cross-checked signatures. And then I called Roy. Roy had been our corporate attorney since day one. We'd gone fishing together more times than I could count. If there was anyone who could help me build a counter-strategy, it was him. He was calm, but sharp. "They're trying to create a paper trail of negligence, Oliver. They want to prove that you're unfit to run the business, or at least make you appear as such." Then we prove them wrong, I said. The next morning, I walked into the warehouse and gathered the senior staff, Erica from operations, Vince from fleet, and Leo from compliance. We met in the break room over burnt coffee. I'm not stepping down, I said simply. And if anyone comes to you with questions about succession, you send them to me. Erica nodded. Vince leaned back and crossed his arms. You got it, boss. But I saw the hesitation in Leo's eyes. I needed to move quickly. Melissa's influence was stretching into every corner of the company. By the end of the week, I had a clear picture of what I was up against. Melissa and Michael were leveraging every tool at their disposal: legal ambiguity, industry gossip, and strategic positioning. They didn't just want control, they wanted me isolated. Even the board was shifting. I received a message from Amanda Lee, our newest board member, suggesting a vision alignment meeting. I wasn't naive. That meant she was being courted. But they'd underestimated something. The man who built Row Logistics didn't rise by letting others write his ending. Father's Day was approaching, and I was ready. By Wednesday morning, the hammer fell. One of our biggest accounts, Delton & Sons Manufacturing, sent an official notice of contract termination. No warning, no request for discussion. I called George Delton personally. He had always taken my calls. George, I said, struggling to keep my voice level, I saw the termination notice. I have to ask, why? There was a pause on the line. Oliver, this wasn't easy. Melissa reached out a few weeks ago, said there was a shift happening. Her proposal was sharp, tech-forward. She talked about autonomous fleet trials, sustainability ratings, dynamic pricing structures. I closed my eyes. She's not in charge. She said you were stepping down, that it was already in motion. Did she show you anything signed? Another pause. No, but she was persuasive. And frankly, we need a partner who's future-facing. The call ended, and I sat in silence. George had been with us for 23 years. The blow wasn't just financial, it was symbolic. Delton was a cornerstone client. His departure would ripple across the network. It wouldn't be long before others followed. I spent the rest of the morning walking through the depot. The crew didn't know yet, but word would spread. I passed the trucks, the mechanics, the loading bays, all of it buzzing with the kind of momentum I once lived for. But today, I was haunted by silence. I went into the maintenance bay, where Randy, our oldest mechanic, was replacing a rear axle on one of the mid-hauls. He looked up from beneath the truck. You all right, boss? I gave him a weak nod. Just a bad morning. He wiped his hands on a rag. Heard Delton's pulling out. Already? Word travels fast. I didn't respond. Just kept walking. That afternoon, I met with Paul, my oldest business partner, at a quiet restaurant off Route 48. Paul had helped me finance our second depot in Cincinnati. He ordered his usual club sandwich, no mayo. I pushed my plate aside. I told him everything. The visit, the documents, the clients pulling away. Paul listened quietly, chewing slowly. When I finished, he wiped his mouth, leaned forward and said, "It's all going according to plan." I frowned. What? Melissa, Michael, this isn't some desperate power grab. It's a blueprint. You're being dismantled, softly, strategically. The client poaching, the legal distractions, the gossip in the industry. This is how it's done now. They're stripping me of credibility, I muttered, bit by bit. Paul nodded. They're not just trying to push you out. They're trying to make you irrelevant. I clenched my fists. The betrayal wasn't just personal. It was professional, cold, methodical. Paul reached for his coffee. You need to lawyer up, not Roy. He's too close to this. Get someone sharp, outside the loop. That night I searched online until I found her, Natalie Voss, a corporate litigator known for defending founders in hostile takeovers. Former SEC legal counsel, no-nonsense reputation. Her tagline read, "Your company, your fight." I made an appointment. 2 days later, I sat in her office. Glass walls, minimalist decor, city skyline behind her. She was younger than I expected, sharp-eyed, with a presence that said she wasn't used to losing. She listened without interruption, asked incisive questions, took notes. Then she pulled out a thick legal pad. "You still have majority control?" she asked. "Yes." "Barely." "Good. Then here's the plan. We establish a timeline, secure the records, and begin issuing notices of misrepresentation to clients who were approached. And we prepare for board defense. We'll also file injunctions to stop any further unauthorized representation." I stared at her. "You think we can fight this?" She smiled thinly. "Mr. Rowe, you've built something worth fighting for, and I don't lose fights." We went over options for nearly 2 hours. She outlined preventative steps, surveillance protocols, digital trail audits. It was meticulous and aggressive, exactly what I needed. She tapped her pen on the table. "You're up against a coordinated campaign. You can't just respond. You have to lead. Set the tempo." Before I left, she handed me a folder. "Read this. Sign nothing from them without calling me first, and keep a record of every client interaction. We'll track the pressure points." For the first time in weeks, I felt something shift. Resolve. They wanted a war. Now they had one. That Friday evening, I sat in the study with the old shoebox. It hadn't been touched in years. The smell of dust and the soft creak of cardboard was enough to pull me back a few decades. Inside were photos, black and white, yellowing at the edges. Melissa in her 5th-grade spelling bee, her arm raised with a toothy grin. Her mother, hands covered in flour, laughing in our first kitchen. The three of us at Lake Erie, Melissa with her toy fishing rod pretending to reel in something big. But there was one picture I kept turning back to. Melissa at 16, standing beside me in the depot. She was wearing oversized gloves and a reflective vest, holding a clipboard twice her size. I had written on the back in faded ink, "Future boss?" I laughed bitterly. I never imagined it would turn out like this. The house was quiet except for the creaking of old floorboards and the occasional bark from the neighbor's dog. I poured myself a scotch and let the memories drift. There had been so much hope in those early years. So many plans. I remembered Melissa shadowing me on summer breaks, asking 1,000 questions, hungry to understand how everything worked. I used to think she admired what I'd built. I used to think she respected me. But admiration had turned into ambition. And ambition, left unchecked, had turned into something colder. It was a kind of hunger, not for growth, but for domination. Somewhere between her MBA and that job in Silicon Valley, my daughter had stopped seeing me as a mentor and started seeing me as an obstacle. Just then, my phone rang. Pete's name lit up the screen. Pete Simmons had worked for me for over 20 years before retiring early to Arizona. We hadn't spoken in months. "Pete?" I said, surprised. "Hey, Oliver, I didn't want to bother you, but I thought you should know. Someone called me this morning, asked if I knew who your replacement was going to be. Said the company's changing hands. Thought you were stepping down." My chest tightened. "Who?" "Didn't say. Just that the word's out. I figured it had to come from the inside. Thanks, Pete. I owe you." After we hung up, I stared at the phone for a long while. It was clear now. Melissa didn't just want to take control. She wanted to bury the past, rewrite it, make it so I never mattered. This wasn't about succession. It was about erasure. It hit me like a wave, cold and sharp. They weren't just coming for the company. They were coming for my name, my legacy, everything I'd built brick by brick. And I wasn't going to let them. I reopened Natalie's folder, went through the checklist she'd written out. Legal groundwork, media control, internal allies. I took notes, annotated strategies, highlighted priority actions. I wasn't just fighting for a company, I was defending a lifetime. Then I picked up the phone and called her again. "Natalie," I said, not waiting for pleasantries. "It's worse than we thought. They're spreading stories, telling people I'm already gone." She didn't hesitate. "Then we go public, a founder's statement. We draft it together. We send it to every client, vendor, and partner. You record a video, standing right there in your warehouse telling the truth." A small fire lit in my chest. "Let's do it," I said. "Good. Because they wanted to erase you, Oliver. But now, they've only guaranteed one thing." "What's that?" "That your story will be heard." We spent the next few hours on the phone, coordinating messaging, drafting the outline, and scheduling media briefings. Natalie wasn't just prepared, she was relentless. Her team would begin immediate outreach. I would speak at the employee meeting Monday morning. There would be no ambiguity. Not anymore. After we hung up, I sat in silence and looked again at the photo of Melissa beside me. That hopeful 16-year-old girl who once wanted to follow in my footsteps. I realized I wasn't just fighting her. I was fighting for her too. To remind her where she came from. To show her that principles still mattered. Now I would show her exactly what those footsteps were made of. And I would walk them all the way to the end, no matter what it cost. Monday came fast. I was at the office before sunrise, pacing the floor of the depot as the crews filtered in. This place had always smelled the same: diesel, coffee, and a hint of motor oil. It was grounding, familiar. At 9 sharp, I gathered the team in the main bay. Natalie had helped me craft every word. I stood on a crate with the warehouse behind me, cameras rolling for our statement video. I started this company with one truck and one promise: we deliver. Not just packages, but trust, reliability, and honesty. That hasn't changed. I haven't stepped down, and I'm not going anywhere. There have been rumors, but I want you to hear the truth from me. This company is staying the course, and so am I. Applause rose, cautious at first, then stronger. I saw nods, clenched jaws, even a few tears. My people still believed. Later that day, I met Natalie in person. She brought someone with her, Rose Camden, a specialist in corporate structure and asset protection, a tall woman with a sharp voice and sharper instincts. "Oliver," she said, shaking my hand. "It's time we tighten the perimeter. Your assets are too exposed. Melissa and Michael have been studying your vulnerabilities. We need to move fast." Rose and Natalie laid out a plan. We'd establish a new holding entity, restructure the company into layered units, and protect ownership through an ironclad trust. Natalie would continue managing external communications and legal resistance, while Rose began forming the legal walls around my life's work. I listened carefully, absorbing every detail. My mind churned, remembering the mistakes I'd made, things I'd overlooked, trust I'd given too freely. That was over now. "I don't want this to happen to anyone else," I said. "I want to future-proof this business. No more backdoor takeovers, no more manipulation." "Then we'll build it that way," Rose assured me. "Once we're done, they won't even get near it without setting off alarms." I nodded. "Let's get started." Within 48 hours we were moving. The trust was drafted, new articles of incorporation filed. Every paper trail was mirrored, encrypted, and locked. Natalie's PR team pushed our video across every industry channel. I received over 50 calls in a day, from clients, allies, even competitors offering support. The tide was turning. But the best call came from Pete. "You've got my support," he said. "I'm flying back to Ohio. I still know how to run an operations audit. Let's show them what loyalty looks like." His voice alone gave me a boost. Pete was more than a loyal former employee. He was a brother in arms, the kind who stood by you when the walls came down. That night, I gathered with the senior team, Erica, Vince, Leo, and now Pete. We spread blueprints and org charts across the conference table. This time, our meeting wasn't just damage control. It was a blueprint for a new era. We're not just saving the company, I said. We're redesigning it, from the inside out. And as we mapped out the new structure, something crystallized. This wasn't just a battle anymore. It was a rebirth. Row Logistics would survive. But more than that, it would evolve. On our terms. We reviewed succession protocols, operational redundancies, and supplier dependencies. Erica suggested centralizing fleet data. Vince pushed for real-time delivery tracking. Pete offered a new warehouse oversight model. We sketched out a 5-year growth plan and initiated a new mentorship program for junior staff. Leo proposed implementing cybersecurity protocols across all internal systems. We launched training programs for our drivers, updated safety protocols, and began renegotiating contracts with a fresh emphasis on transparency and trust. We also held a town hall for the entire company. I stood there with my sleeves rolled up and no script, telling the truth, telling them that mistakes had been made, but the core values hadn't changed. I saw renewed eyes looking back at me, some skeptical, some hopeful, but all of them listening. At the end of it all, I leaned back and smiled. I built this once, I said. Now we're going to build it better. And I would make damn sure no one ever threatened it again. This was more than a counterattack. It was a transformation. And I wasn't just doing it for me. I was doing it for everyone who had ever believed in what Row Logistics stood for. And for the legacy I'd passed down, not just to Melissa, but to every honest, hard-working soul under this roof. It began with a file folder buried in the archives. Pete had been digging through the contract database when he flagged a discrepancy. "You'll want to see this," he said, laying the documents in front of me. It was the Delton & Sons contract, the very client who'd walked away under the lure of Melissa's tech-driven promises. But as I scanned the agreement, my eyes narrowed. The clause was clear. No external partnership or competitor engagement was permitted during the term of the contract without written consent from our side. They had violated it. Open and shut. Attached was an email from Michael, dated weeks before the contract's termination. It detailed the terms of a proposal to Carter Logistics, Melissa's front, now run jointly by her and Michael. It was damning. My jaw tightened. "Get me Carter's CEO," I told Natalie. "Now." By noon, I was on the line with Rhonda Carter, a shrewd, calculated executive whose reputation for discretion was well known. I didn't mince words. "Your firm's engagement with Delton & Sons violates a standing contract. I have the original agreement, the dates, and communications. If the deal isn't rescinded immediately, I'll make this public. And I'll make sure every logistics board and investor newsletter sees the documents." Rhonda's silence was palpable. Then, "Mr. Rowe, we were assured this was handled above board. It wasn't. And you know it. If I go to the press, this doesn't just affect your client, it affects your investors." She exhaled sharply. "Give me 48 hours. "You have 24. I hung up. The ripple effect was immediate. Carter Logistics went into internal review. The Delton deal froze. Phones rang. Lawyers buzzed. The entire industry, already on edge from the public statement I'd made the week prior, now watched closely. Insider forums lit up with speculation. Industry analysts began publishing articles questioning the ethical conduct of startup operations led by ex-corporate heirs. By evening, the whispers had turned into headlines. Natalie's media team worked quickly, seeding the right storylines. Contract violations, familial betrayal, and the legal comeback of a founder fighting for what he built. Our message was gaining traction, the narrative was shifting. And at Melissa's home, chaos erupted. Natalie, who had contacts in their circle, forwarded me a message. Melissa had erupted at Michael, demanding to know why he hadn't covered their tracks better. Carter's legal team had requested a freeze on all new agreements, pending review of fraudulent conduct. Their momentum was breaking. Melissa's carefully curated image, graceful disruptor, visionary heir, was unraveling. Investors grew skittish. Employees questioned her direction. One of her junior managers anonymously leaked details to a journalist, painting a picture of internal confusion and top-down manipulation. By that evening, Michael had already reached out to a mutual acquaintance seeking damage control PR services. Melissa, once poised and measured, was seen storming out of a local board meeting, phone pressed to her ear, face red. More intel followed. A mutual contact at Silverhorn Ventures, one of the firms that had been interested in investing in Melissa's new venture, backed out, citing reputational volatility. That same day, another major client who had been flirting with defection called me personally to confirm their loyalty. "We always trusted you, Oliver," he said. "This latest mess proves we made the right call." Meanwhile, Rose worked with Natalie and me to file an injunction freezing Melissa and Michael's ability to make contractual representations under the Roe brand. Natalie filed defamation counterclaims. We weren't just on the offense, we were tightening the noose. I sat back in my chair, the old leather creaking beneath me. For the first time in weeks, I felt control returning to my hands, not just legally, but strategically. The pendulum had begun to swing. This was the first strike. Natalie walked into my office, eyes bright. "That was bold." "Necessary," I replied. "Now they know I'm not playing defense anymore." She smiled. "So what's next?" I looked at the wall behind her, an old photo of our first depot, before the expansion, before the empire. My resolve solidified. "Now," I said, "we take back everything they tried to steal, piece by piece. And piece by piece, I would show them that legacies can't be stolen. They have to be earned and protected." I opened the next file. Phase 2 would begin tomorrow, and this time I wasn't just fighting for my company, I was reclaiming my name. Rose and I met in the back office, behind locked doors and without a paper trail. She brought a portfolio with sealed tabs, encrypted drives, and a plan that relied not on retaliation, but stealth. "We'll form a trust, one no one can trace to you. Not easily," she said. "It will own your shares, protect your assets, and eliminate their path to leverage." I nodded. "And the company?" She unrolled a proposal. "We identify a silent investor, one you trust, someone whose name won't raise flags. We structure the sale in segments, control transitions behind closed doors. Melissa and Michael will still be chasing shadows by the time the ink dries." Natalie joined us by video. "This isn't just protection," she added. "This is resurrection. When we surface this publicly, on your terms, it'll change the narrative again. You'll be seen not as the man fighting back, but as the man who evolved." We worked late into the night. The name of the investor, Charles Wexler, a man I'd mentored years ago, now head of a growing logistics firm out of Colorado, quiet, loyal, and more than capable. Charles flew in the next morning. We met in a quiet restaurant 2 towns over. The handshake was firm, the agreement fast. I would retain advisory rights, but full legal ownership would pass to the trust. The company would remain Roe Logistics in name, but it would be protected by walls my daughter would never scale. "Let them scream," Charles said. "They won't find an opening." Within a week, the documents were prepared. The transition was silent, seamless, and completely under the radar. New accounts, revised internal hierarchies, non-disclosure clauses enforced with iron precision. Meanwhile, inside the company, morale shifted. Those once unsure began to steady. My leadership wasn't questioned anymore. It was reinforced by resilience and strategy. Then, the next attack came. Melissa and Michael filed a new lawsuit. this time accusing me of financial misconduct. Improper asset handling, they called it. Undue enrichment, Natalie called immediately. It's panic. They're flailing. They want to trigger a freeze, Rose said, but they'll find nothing to freeze. We gathered our legal team that evening. 12 hours later, Rose and her associates were ready with a counterclaim. We didn't just deny the allegations, we proved malicious intent, fabricated statements, unverified sources, baseless numbers. We dissected their attack line by line. By morning, our press release went out. Natalie's communications team launched a second media wave, focused not just on defense, but reinvention. They crafted the story of an elder statesman in logistics, mentoring a rising generation, safeguarding legacy through transformation. The headlines followed suit. The Reluctant Titan Fights Back read one. Rose Renaissance read another. Social media exploded. Industry influencers applauded the leadership pivot. Local business papers featured op-eds calling Rowe Logistics a case study in legacy resilience. Clients who had remained quiet began forwarding referrals again. Even former competitors reached out. The legal case? We met it head-on. Natalie arranged a televised interview for me on a prominent business channel. I spoke plainly, without flair, just facts and quiet fire. Our industry thrives on trust, I said, not just in contracts, but in people. The minute we let ambition turn into betrayal, we lose more than just revenue. We lose our soul. The response was overwhelming. Support flooded in from peers, clients, even retired competitors. My inbox filled with messages that began with, "Thank you for standing up." Melissa had underestimated me. Michael had gambled wrong. They thought they could erase a legacy with a few signatures and some clever PR. They forgot who wrote the original playbook. By Thursday, whispers of Michael's removal from key management positions began surfacing. Anonymous sources from their team leaked discontent. The very foundation of their House of Cards operation was cracking. As the sun set behind the office that Friday, I stood by the loading dock with Charles and Pete, watching a new fleet roll out with freshly painted logos and tighter systems. The drivers laughed. The mechanics gave thumbs up. Behind us, workers were installing a new sign above the main doors, sleek, confident, bold. This wasn't just recovery. This was resurgence. The invitation arrived via courier, hand-delivered, embossed stationery, Melissa's handwriting unmistakable. Father's Day dinner, just the family. Let's make peace. Rose narrowed her eyes when she read it. It's a trap, she said bluntly. They'll have witnesses, legal pressure, probably documents they'll push in front of you again. I nodded. I'm sure they will. But I'm going. Oliver, I've spent my life building something worth more than just money. They tried to take it, twist it, and use it against me. Now I get to show them what they lost. That morning, before I put on my suit, I signed the final transfer agreement. The trust had officially sold Rowe Logistics to Wexler Holdings. The ink was dry, the protections in place. Everything Melissa and Michael once sought to steal now existed beyond their reach. I spent the rest of the day walking the docks, shaking hands with the workers, exchanging stories with old friends. Some of these people had been with me since the beginning. They didn't care about boardrooms or brand strategies. They respected effort, commitment, presence. I gave that to them for 4 decades, and I'd do it again. As I drove toward Melissa's home that evening, I passed through familiar streets lined with families setting up barbecues and folding chairs in their front yards. Children waved tiny flags, dogs barked, laughter floated from open windows. Father's Day. It used to mean something else. Cards, hugs, moments that felt whole. Now it was a battleground dressed in ribbon and roast beef. Her house was a fortress of ambition, clean-cut hedges, metallic gates, digital surveillance. I walked up the stone path alone. I rang the bell. Melissa opened the door herself. "Dad," she said, breathless, "I'm glad you came. I said I would." The dining room sparkled with artificial elegance. A crystal chandelier, a table set with fine china, candles flickering with programmable precision. Michael appeared from the side room, flanked by two well-dressed individuals, clearly lawyers, though they were dressed like friends. There was always a performance. Dinner was polite, manufactured. Melissa asked about old friends from the company. Michael reminisced about a logistics conference he'd never enjoyed. I nodded and responded with bland civility. I studied them as they danced around the real reason for this dinner. Melissa's smile was tense, her voice modulated to faux sincerity. Michael laughed too loudly, adjusted his cufflinks too often. The lawyers remained quiet but watchful. We made it through the salad course and main entree. Then, as dessert was brought out, a polished crème brûlée with strawberries, I saw it. A shift in posture. Melissa placed a small leather-bound folder on the table. She cleared her throat. "Dad, this isn't easy for us. We made mistakes. We acted out of pressure. But we think it's time to bring this to a conclusion." Michael slid the folder toward me. "This agreement is different. We made changes. It gives you the respect you deserve. Board advisor status, lifetime name recognition, even a memorialized leadership archive. No strings, just peace." I opened it. Glossy pages, signatures already in place. It smelled like theater. It reeked of desperation. I chuckled. Not loudly, but it was enough. "You've missed one important detail," I said, slowly closing the folder. Melissa's hand froze mid-reach. "There is no company left to take," I said. "I sold it. This morning. Row Logistics belongs to Wexler Holdings. The trust insured it. You're not getting near it again." Michael went pale. "You sold it?" "To someone I trust. To someone who built from the ground up. Someone who understands what legacy means. You gambled on my hesitation and lost." Melissa's eyes flickered. "You had no right. I had every right," I cut in. "What I didn't have was the luxury of pretending my own daughter wouldn't stab me twice in the same place." Silence, deafening and thick. I stood slowly. "I came tonight for closure, for the slim hope that you remembered something real. The warehouse days. The way you used to ask me about cargo weights and truck brands like they were candy. The way your eyes lit up when we built the second depot. But you're not that girl anymore." "I'm still your daughter," she whispered. "Then act like it." I set the folder down, untouched. "This dinner? It's the last page in a book you chose to end." Melissa said nothing. Michael sat rigid, unsure whether to speak or vanish. I walked to the door. My hand on the knob, I turned once more. "Melissa, I do love you. But love without respect isn't family. It's fiction. And I'm done living in a story someone else is writing." Outside, Rose waited in the car. She didn't ask anything when I slid into the passenger seat. She simply put the vehicle in gear and drove. We passed those same families again, still laughing, still sharing food on their lawns. I watched them disappear in the rearview mirror. "Did it hurt?" Rose asked finally. "Yes," I admitted. "But I would do it again. For what's right." She nodded. "Then you're free." "No," I corrected softly. "Now I'm finally home." As the plates were cleared and the ambient music softened, I felt it in the air. A shift, a prelude. Melissa looked to Michael, who gave a slight nod. It was time. She reached under the table and retrieved a leather-bound folder. With carefully measured grace, she placed it on the table between us. "Dad," she said, her tone now solemn, rehearsed. "We've given this a lot of thought. This agreement resolves everything. No lawsuits, no media fallout, your legacy preserved. The company moves forward with clarity." Michael leaned in, supportive. "We're offering you dignity, Oliver. And closure. It's what you wanted, isn't it? I didn't touch the folder right away. My gaze shifted from Melissa to Michael, then to the two lawyers seated discreetly behind them, men in tailored suits, pretending to blend in with the polished ambiance of this orchestrated dinner. I expected something more original, I said, glancing down at the folder. Though I admit the showmanship is impressive. Melissa's smile faltered. We mean this sincerely. I finally opened the folder, thumbing through the neatly printed contract. Pages of offers, figurehead positions, non-disparagement clauses, post-retirement stipends. Nothing new, nothing genuine, nothing I hadn't already anticipated. Each line was a carefully coded bribe. Silence wrapped in ceremony. I set the folder down, folded my hands, and looked directly at my daughter. You've missed one important detail. The room stilled. There is no company left to take, I said. Row Logistics was sold. Yesterday morning. Wexler Holdings owns every asset, every truck, every route, every client, even the brand name. That agreement you just handed me, it's legally meaningless. Melissa froze. Her lips parted, but no words came. Michael leaned back, blinking. One of the lawyers, clearly more junior, reached for his phone. The other leaned forward, voice tight. Sold? To whom exactly? Wexler Holdings, I repeated, pulling a single-page confirmation from my inside coat pocket. Finalized at 9:17 a.m. The trust signed off, irrevocable, witnessed, notarized, sealed. Michael stood suddenly, pushing back from the table. This is absurd. We had board influence. You had assumptions, I corrected. While you staged your coup, I moved quietly. Unlike you, I didn't need betrayal to act. I needed precision. Melissa's hands trembled now. You went behind our backs. No, I said. You went behind mine. I just chose to respond like a founder, not a fool. She rose, trying to find some ground. You'll regret this. You think this protects your name? The press will say, they'll say I defended what I built. And if they don't, I don't care. I didn't build Row Logistics for fame or favor. I built it for purpose, for pride. You mistook inheritance for entitlement. Her face collapsed into a mask of fury and disbelief. Michael remained standing, staring at the document in my hand like it might catch fire. I trusted you, I said quietly. Not to run things, but to respect them. You couldn't even do that. A long silence followed. The lawyers sat frozen, unsure whether to interject or disappear. I pushed the folder back across the table with one finger. This isn't just void, it's pathetic. Then I turned. I walked slowly, deliberately, past the stunned silence, past the remains of the dinner, past the walls of curated art and subtle threats. Every step was a reclamation. Outside, the night air was fresh with the scent of jasmine and the faint buzz of cicadas. Rose sat waiting, leaning against the car, arms folded. She opened the door for me without a word. Once inside, I closed the door gently and let the silence settle around me. Well? She asked. They tried to trap me with broken glass, I said, but I walked in with steel. She gave a small smile and shifted into gear. So what now? Now, I said, looking out at the stars through the windshield. We rebuild, on my terms, with people who remember what loyalty means. As we pulled away, I watched the house grow smaller in the mirror, its towering windows, its sculpted hedges, its illusions. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel betrayed. I felt clean, light, whole. They had come for the throne, but I had taken the kingdom with me. The days that followed the Father's Day dinner passed in a peculiar kind of quiet, not the silence of defeat, nor the peace that follows reconciliation, but something in between, a clearing of smoke after a fire, the ground still warm beneath your feet. The calls came first. Melissa's number flashed on my phone several times each day. Then the messages. Long paragraphs, short bursts, voice notes with stuttered apologies and choked back tears. Michael left one voicemail, his voice low, rehearsed, full of hollow remorse. I didn't answer. I didn't respond. Some silences aren't cruel. They're necessary. The kind that protects what little good is left by refusing to give it room to be destroyed further. Melissa's final message arrived on the third day. Please, just talk to me. I didn't mean for it to go this far. And that, perhaps, was the truth that hurt most. She didn't mean for it to go this far, because she never thought I'd resist. The lawyers, once aggressive and hungry, withdrew with quiet embarrassment. One even sent a bland, conciliatory email wishing me well and thanking me for my years of leadership. The media trickled off soon after. Without a scandal or a sale to report, they found other dramas to chase. The silence became mine to shape. I filled it with slow mornings, fresh coffee, and books I hadn't opened in years. Rose and I spent afternoons reviewing new opportunities, ventures that had nothing to do with freight or freight rates. Look at this one, she said one afternoon, sliding a folder toward me. It's a vineyard upstate. They're looking for a silent partner and someone with operations experience. I raised an eyebrow. Winemaking? That's a far cry from pallets and pallets? She grinned. You could build something with your hands again, just with more sunshine and fewer deadlines. I thumbed through the pages. Photos of sloping hills, rows of vines beneath amber skies, equipment lists, seasonal charts, names like Silverwood and Whisper Pines. Redemption Hill, I said aloud. Rose tilted her head. What? If I ever do this, I said, closing the folder, that's what I'll call it. Redemption Hill. Because some things aren't meant to be inherited. They're meant to be earned. That night, long after Rose had gone home, I sat at my old desk. The same desk I had once used to approve million-dollar contracts, to design warehouse blueprints, to write letters of recommendation for interns who reminded me of Melissa. I pulled out a sheet of thick stationery, the kind reserved for letters that were never meant to be casual. I wrote, My dearest daughter, I raised you to be strong, curious, and fearless. I gave you the best parts of me, and in return, I asked only for honesty and respect. You were always sharp, bright, capable. I saw it in your eyes when you rode the forklifts, when you sat beside me asking questions about the business. I hoped you'd want to grow it, with me. But somewhere along the line, growth turned into conquest. Partnership turned into strategy. You wanted the crown without the burden, the name without the labor. I offered you the path to leadership, and you chose a shortcut paved in shadows. I don't hate you, Melissa, but I cannot trust you. Not anymore. And trust is the root of every legacy. We are not enemies, but we are no longer aligned, and that break, it was your doing, not mine. I hope one day, when you look back, you understand the difference. Goodbye, Oliver. I folded the letter, sealed it in an envelope, and placed it in the back of the drawer. No stamp, no address. Some messages are meant to be written, not delivered. Outside, snow had begun to fall. Not a heavy storm, but a soft, persistent blanket of white. The kind that transformed even the hardest landscapes into something quiet, clean. I stepped onto the balcony, the cold biting at my cheeks. Below, the city was still alive, cars inching along snowy roads, pedestrians bundled in scarves, the occasional sound of laughter echoing through the street. But up here, it was different. Up here, I could see everything. The skyline I had helped build, freight by freight. The bridges we'd once used to move goods coast to coast. And beyond it all, the horizon, painted in shades of indigo and snow light. For years, my life had been a map of checklists and margins. Now it was a blank page. Behind me, the apartment glowed with soft lamplight. A fire crackled. A cup of tea steamed on the table. Rose had left a note on the counter. "Call me tomorrow. We'll plant the first seed." I smiled. The war was over. And this, not the money, not the victory, not even the letter, this moment was the reward. My life was just beginning. Peace, I learned, is a delicate silence easily broken by ego. I hadn't even finished unpacking the last crate at the vineyard when the first legal envelope arrived. Thick, embossed, and unnecessarily dramatic. Melissa and Michael had not gone quietly. Their new legal team accused me of orchestrating the sale of Rowe Logistics under false pretenses. They alleged coercion, manipulation, mental unfitness. They claimed the trust had been signed while I was under undue influence from Rose. They wanted the deal nullified, the assets frozen, and a full financial audit. I sat by the fire and read the letter 3 times. Each read was more absurd than the last. Rose joined me, holding 2 glasses of the vineyard's early blend. "They're fishing," she said, skimming the letter. "Sloppy fishing. Wrong statutes, missing references. This isn't law, it's theater." "Desperate theater," I said. "But let's not underestimate their capacity for noise." My legal team responded with a portfolio of airtight documentation, signed trust agreements, verified sale contracts, mental competency evaluations, and notarized timelines. Wexler Holdings added their own legal weight, citing the finality of the transaction. Within a week, Melissa's first lawsuit was thrown out by the court. Jurisdictional issues, procedural errors, and most damning of all, insufficient evidence. The judge's ruling included a footnote referencing the frivolous nature of the claim. But they weren't done. A week later, a fabricated email surfaced in the press. Michael had tried to frame me with doctored communications suggesting I'd planned to defraud shareholders. Unfortunately for them, the metadata was still intact. Rose traced the document's creation to a laptop registered to Melissa's marketing agency. The outlet that published it issued a retraction within 48 hours. Another legal embarrassment. Michael, cornered by the scandal, attempted his own desperate pivot, announcing a tell-all memoir on business betrayal and generational conflict. No publisher picked it up. Melissa tried again, this time through social media, a live stream from her overly styled living room. Tears, shaky hands, a voice straining with emotion. She spoke of betrayal, of a father who abandoned her, of a childhood filled with cold warehouses and unfair expectations. She said she forgave me and hoped I'd someday do the same. I didn't watch it. Rose did. "She's crying," she told me. "But not for you. For the audience. For the brand." The media tide had turned. Articles stopped using words like legacy and began using phrases like failed succession and public unraveling. One business podcast labeled the saga a cautionary tale in entitlement, and then the final blow: quiet, corporate. Wexler Holdings unveiled the new public archive for Rowe Logistics. A rebranding announcement highlighted transparency, innovation, and sustainable growth. The company history had been carefully updated. Melissa's name was gone. No mention of her contributions. No photo on the leadership timeline, just a brief line. An attempted restructuring effort was reviewed and reversed in early 2025. Michael was never mentioned. I didn't cheer. I didn't toast. I just stood by the vineyard fence that evening, watching the winter wind comb through the dormant rows, thinking of all the years I had spent tending to something not unlike this land. Soil that needed patience. Work that required trust. In erasing their names, I hadn't erased them from my life, but I had placed them where they belonged, in the past, in a chapter already closed. The vineyard was quiet. Rose joined me with a wool blanket draped over her shoulders. We watched the stars come out. "They'll stop now," she said. "They've got nothing left." "They never had it to begin with," I replied. She looked at me sideways. "Do you miss her?" I didn't answer right away. I miss who she was, not who she chose to become. The wind shifted. The sky glittered. Behind us, the cabin glowed warm. On the table inside, seed catalogs waited. Grapes, herbs, wildflowers. Spring planning. Let them keep their lawsuits and their sorrow. I had something better. The peace of being misunderstood. The joy of starting over. This was no longer a story about business. It was a story about roots, and I was finally ready to plant them again.